Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Americans for Limited Government live stream. I'm Catherine Mortensen, along with Richard Manning, the president of Americans for Limited Government. We want to talk to you about the upcoming election. Actually, it's happening right now, the Virginia governor's race. The polls close at 7 p.m. Eastern tonight. That's in about 4 hours from now. And Rick, this election gets a lot of national attention every 4 years. Virginians go to the polls to elect a governor, the House of Delegates, and it's an off-year election. There's only a handful of states that have statewide elections in these off-election years. So is that the reason that this Virginia election gets so much attention, or is there something even more significant?
Yeah, it gets attention because it is there's in this happened election year, two statewide elections, and every other odd number year, you also have Mississippi and another state that have off-year elections. But by and large, this is one of the only games in town. It has some additional appeal because a lot of the DC political people live in Virginia, so they have a personal stake in the game. But the fact of the matter is, the real way that this plays a role is it's sort of a one-year marker from the election of a new president in this instance. And it's a way to see how that president is doing with the people. Virginia has switched from being a dead red state to a pretty blue state over the last 12 years. And so this is going to be really, really interesting. The Republicans have not elected a governor in Virginia for 12 years. And if Glenn Youngkin should be elected, he will break that pattern and really send shockwaves, because a lot of people in DC think of Virginia as a blue state now.
Well, Rick, I am sort of like the target demographic for these elections here in Virginia. I'm a Northern Virginia suburban mother. Every article I read says that I'm the key demo that swings these elections, or that my group of suburban moms have, we've shifted to the left in recent years, which I know for a fact is true. Suburban women here in my neighborhood, my friends, women in my book club, at church, have really, really gone to the left. But I can just say anecdotally, just from speaking with friends here, a lot of them may be voting Republican, maybe voting Youngkin this time around over this one issue that we've all been hearing about in this Virginia election. It's our children's educations and what's been happening in the classrooms. A lot of moms and dads are very upset about critical race theory. They're upset about the treatment of parents at school board meetings. I have good friends who have shown up to a lot of the school board meetings here in Fairfax County over the past year to protest the mandates with the masks and the closures affecting our children. So I know that a lot of parents are fired up, and some people are saying that could swing this election in the favor of Youngkin, who is opposing mask mandates in classrooms. He's opposing vaccine mandates, and he's saying he's going to get people back to school, back to work. He's going to lower taxes. He's going to ensure that parents are treated fairly in the classrooms and at school board meetings, and that they're not targeted as domestic terrorists. So there's a lot of reasons that I am personally hopeful, and I think that things could work out well for limited government advocates. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Americans for Limited Government, along with a group known as Virginians for America First, which we've been working closely with, have gone into 20 House of Delegates districts, which are swing districts. The Republicans need to pick up 6 seats in the House of Delegates to get a majority. And so we focused on those, and we've been focusing on them since February 1. And we've been knocking on doors over the last month, actually about 6 weeks, and we've discovered something. In those 20 districts, we found that people who were low propensity, meaning unlikely to vote, but registered, that those people were going to vote. And 5 weeks ago, the number one issue was critical race theory. which is a pretty complex item on the agenda for people who are not engaged enough that they vote every time. So it's really caught fire here in Virginia itself. But 3 weeks ago, then it became parental rights as Terry McAuliffe, the Democrat governor, gubernatorial nominee and former governor, basically said that parents don't have any business having any say-so in the curriculum of their kids. Just stay out of the education system, leave the educating up to the professionals, and just stay at home and trust us with your children. Well, that didn't sit very well with a lot of parents, and so that became the number one issue at the doors when we were talking to people 3 weeks ago. And somewhat surprisingly, this week the number one issue has now switched to being the economy. And the economy is terrible. We know that we have massive inflation. We know that there are that a lot of people can't find people to work. We see empty shelves. We have the threat of empty shelves for Christmas. And so people are now focused on the economy. All three of those issues are bad for Joe Biden. And in this instance, Joe Biden is the anchor around Terry McAuliffe's neck in this race. Joe Biden's policies, a year of Joe Biden's policies, has caused people to wake up to what's going on, whether it's critical race theory, whether it's parental rights in terms of their school, or whether it's just the economic conditions that they live in. Parents are paying attention, parents are upset, and parents are going to vote. And those parents are going to vote, by and large, are going to vote for the Republicans. So if things go as we saw, based on knocking on over 70,000 doors over the last 6 weeks, if things go the way we've kind of been seeing and trend lines happen, this should be a very, very good day for Republicans.
Rick, one thing that I think has a lot of people concerned is the absentee ballots, because in the presidential election just a year ago, that seemed to be sort of the center of any potential scams and frauds and schemes. Always seem to be centered on those absentee ballots, because there's just not a lot of integrity in what happens once they're requested, where they go, and then once they get to someone's home, are we sure that they haven't been tampered with by the time they're counted? I mean, that was just such a nightmare a year ago. Has Virginia done anything to protect the integrity of absentee ballots so that we can have more faith and confidence in the results?
Unfortunately not. Now, what I'll tell you what the situation is now, but let me tell you what Americans for Limited Government did. We went to every registrar voter in the state. We asked how you're going to handle absentee ballots. We went back, and if they were saying something that wasn't following the law, we let them know what the law was. We then trained people to be observers, so they would be able to be official election observers on the inside to ensure that those ballots were treated the way they were supposed to be treated under the law. And so we've put a tremendous amount of effort and energy into training people and getting people equipped to be able to make certain the law is followed. But we've had a couple of things happen that do give us pause. Fairfax County, which is the largest by population county in the state of Virginia, Fairfax County has said that they're not going to require that the last 4 digits of somebody's social security number to be included, which means there's no verification of who they are. Secondly, even though that's the law says they have to do that, they're saying they're not going to. They also have said that they are going to that they are curing ballots, that they're going to be actually going and fixing ballots that come in, absentee ballots that come in that aren't fully prepared properly. And so they're actually going to be fixing those ballots, and they're going to be fixing them all the way until this Friday, when the last of the absentee ballots can be received in the state of Virginia. So there's some things that are happening that are pretty disconcerting. But overall, the trend lines all exist that it should be a good night for the Republicans. But once again, we really can't tell what's going on. There's going to be legal battles like in everything else. And so far, the judges in Northern Virginia have been giving a lot of leeway to Fairfax County. to change the rules, even though the rules are written in black and white. They're just doing sort of what they want to do. And that's not exactly a great sign. I do believe that the vote against what's been going on in Washington, D.C., the vote against Joe Biden, and make no mistake, this is a referendum on Joe Biden, that the vote against Joe Biden will be so overwhelming that they'll be able to hear "Let's Go Brandon" all the way to California.
Well, I hope you're right. I did read today in the Wall Street Journal that Virginia is allowing the local governments to count the absentee ballots sort of as they've been coming in. Or is it early voting? Let me check that article real quick, Rick, so make sure I've got my facts right.
I think you had it right.
It was absentee ballots. They were saying, okay, we're going to try to count those as they come in. Virginia recently made changes that should speed up the vote counting process. The state now requires localities to start pre-processing absentee ballots earlier, which will save time on election day. As a result, officials expect to start reporting absentee ballots early on election night, soon after polls close. Okay, well, that's a very good development, right? But there's another thing that I've been hearing about with regards to absentee ballots that does have me very concerned. The Democrats have already filed a lawsuit saying that the claim is that there's 300,000 absentee ballots that were asked for, have not made it to people's homes, and they may be, the Democrats are claiming that they're jammed up somewhere in the Postal Service, that the Postal Service has been ineffective and inefficient, and that these ballots aren't getting to people's homes. Whereas you noted yesterday, you put out a statement and indicating that independent observers of the process say, as of yesterday, there were only 100,000 ballots, absentee ballots that had been requested that had not come back. So there's not even these 300,000 floating around missing out there. We don't know where that number came from, but I'm concerned the Democrats are going to try to jam things up in a big way if the results are close tonight.
Yeah, one of the things they might try to do as a result of that claim is have a judge say that ballots can come in later because they were received later. That's something they may try to do. You know, it's always interesting, this stuff, but I will tell you just one little tidbit. Richmond is a place, Richmond, Virginia, the capital of the state, is typically a place with a significant Democrat vote turnout, 90-10 kind of Democrat turnout. And the absentee ballot requests in Richmond, Virginia were extremely low. And those are votes straight out of the Democrats' hide, because you can't just suddenly, create absentee ballot requests out of thin air, at least not legitimately. And there's enough people watching to know what's exactly happening, because the numbers are there. The numbers are available to be able to get if you've applied to get them in advance. And so that's one of those things that in a place like Richmond, they didn't get a large absentee ballot turnout. And that's bad for the Democrats. The Republicans in this election, like many, are going to have to come out and vote. They're going to have to go to polling places and vote. It's raining in Northern Virginia. I don't know what it's doing in the rest of the state, but in Northern Virginia, it's raining. That tends to depress turnout. The one thing that we do know, however, is that Republican voters have extraordinary enthusiasm. Terry McAuliffe had to call off a rally in southeastern Virginia because he thought people who supported him were going to show up, and the rally was overwhelmed by people who supported Glenn Youngkin, his opponent. And so he called off the rally. We had an ending rally in Loudoun County where the CRT and the girl was raped in the school bathroom, which made national news. We had a rally. Youngkin had a rally there, and it was the line to get to the rally was a mile long. People in a mile long backup to try to get in the rally. So the enthusiasm's all inside the Republicans, which means if they haven't voted, they will. And whereas you might normally expect that the rain would depress turnout, it depresses the turnout of those who aren't very excited about voting, you're not going to keep those parents from voting no matter what obstacle you put in front of them. So I'd be very surprised if once again, if Glenn Youngkin doesn't win, or at least they may delay it to call it until Friday, but that if he doesn't end up prevailing in the end. And I'll be extremely surprised if the House of Delegates doesn't flip to the Republicans. Once again, this is 9.5 months of work from Americans for Limited Government to try to get voter integrity measures put in place in those counties and those districts, and to get voter turnout in those districts, and to really engage the voters of those districts one-on-one. And as a result of that, I think we're going to end up with a really good result. In Liberty, we're going to prove that in Virginia, counter to what those in the Democratic Party think and those in the White House think, Virginians, they are lovers. They're lovers of liberty.
I like what our supporter Britta Rebecca has been commenting during our broadcast, Rick. She says there's no way that it shouldn't land on Youngkin. Well, Britta, I hope that you are right. And in fact, I'm going to have to cut our broadcast short here because I am volunteering to go to my polling location today and be a greeter, passing out literature for my local Republican Party. I've been on the Republican Party lists, and so I frequently get called and invited to help out with election things. But this year, I asked I wanted to volunteer, but there weren't enough slots, if you can believe that. So then somebody called me back just last night and said, hey, there's an opening. Do you want to come down and help out? And I've never seen that before, where they were just overwhelmed with volunteers. But so I do think that bodes well for those of us who support limited government. And Rick, we have one more comment here.
Now, let me give you one thing. Hey, Diana. Keep the prayers going, because it needs to be happening. And people, if you live around the country and you know somebody in Virginia, reach out to them. Make sure that they're voting. If you have even on your email list, reach out to them. Make sure they're voting. Similarly, in New Jersey, where there's an election being held today, that's much tighter than the Democrats thought at the top of the ticket. Reach out to people you know. Make sure they're voting. There's only 4 hours, 3.5 hours left before the polling places close. But those votes that are cast in the last 3.5 hours count every bit as much as the votes that are cast in 45 days ago, when voting started in Virginia. So let's do it. And thank you, Catherine, for reaching out and doing that, and greeting people, and just kind of getting your feet on the ground in terms of this election. It really does matter.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thank you to everyone for joining us for an Americans for Limited Government live stream. And hopefully tomorrow we will be joining you again with really good news for lovers of limited government. We may have the results, we may not. So just stay tuned. Watch this space tomorrow. And thanks everyone for being a part of this fight to save liberty and freedom. Thank you.